let's start with Abu Yazid al-Bistami. This is a figure who seems to redefine the very limits of human willpower. So when he was asked about the beginning of his spiritual training, his riyada, what did he say?
What he described is almost unbelievable to us today, but the context is everything. This was the opening act of his purification.
The opening act.
He said that when he invited his soul to submit completely to the divine, it resisted him.
So an internal rebellion, basically. How did he deal with that?
He took vows that just seem impossible. To subdue his soul, he vowed not to drink water for an entire year.
Wait, what?
For an entire year. And at the same time, he vowed not to sleep for an entire year.
A year without water or sleep.
Yeah.
That completely flies in the face of basic human biology. Are we supposed to take that literally?
That is the critical question. And even within the tradition, there's some debate. But the main scholarly view from these sources is that, yes, these accounts are understood as historical fact.
How is that possible?
Well, perhaps the lack of sleep meant never lying down, never succumbing to deep rest.
Yeah.
And water might have meant a radical, punishing abstinence from even essential comforts. The point isn't the physical impossibility itself.
It's the decision behind it.
Exactly. It was the radical internal decision to break the lower self's reliance on everything, even the basics of survival. It was about annihilating reliance on the physical body.
That reframes it completely. So it's not a magic trick. It's an extreme act of self-annihilation to prove commitment. If that's just the beginning, how high did they expect to go? Did they, have a list of everyone who reached this rank?
What's beautiful in the sources is the sense of profound humility about any kind of spiritual hierarchy. Al-Bistami himself and even the mysterious figure of al-Qadr, they both said something very similar, that they constantly discovered new unknown saints. The lesson is that God's creation has more hidden friends than anyone can count. It's vast, and crucially, it's hidden.
And these high-level experiences they had, these mushahadat, they almost never talked about them. Why so quiet?
Because they understood that these states are, well, they're often beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. Trying to explain it would just lead to confusion, or even worse, it could lead to arrogance from people who hadn't walked that path.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because if a saint has that level of internal power, you'd expect them to embrace the external signs, right? The miracles, the supernatural gifts, the spiritual bling, you could call it.
Right. But al-Bistami actively rejected them.
That's the key.
It's a huge insight. There's an account of a man named Yahya observing him. He said al-Bistami stood, wide-eyed and sleepless, from the night prayer until dawn, constantly on his toes. And after all that, he starts petitioning God.
But his wish wasn't for more power.
Precisely. He said others were given gifts, walking on water, walking on air, controlling the treasures of the earth, and he noted they were content with those things.
But not him.
He explicitly sought refuge from those gifts. He asked for what was beyond them.
So the miracle isn't the reward, it's a potential distraction.
It's a veil. He believed accepting these gifts, even spiritual ones, would veil him. It would shield him from the greater ultimate realization of the divine presence. It sets up this idea that true success is about seeking the essence, not the side effects.
That concept, that a miracle is actually a distraction, is so important for understanding the next claim in our sources, which is, it's just astonishing. It involves a man named Abu Turab al-Nakhshabi.
Right. He was traveling with a novice disciple, a murid, who was clearly getting a little bit spiritually arrogant, self-satisfied.
The novice was so impressed with himself that when Abu Turab suggested he go visit the great master, al-Bistami, the novice just kind of scoffed.
He scoffed and said, "I have seen God, and he has made me content beyond needing Abu Yazid."
I mean, that's the ultimate claim, isn't it? I don't need anyone else.
Yeah.
How did Abu Turab respond to that?
He was completely provoked, and he delivered this deeply shocking, paradoxical reply. He said, "Woe to you, to see Abu Yazid once is better for you than seeing God 70 times.
Okay. That sounds on the surface almost blasphemous. How can seeing a human being be better than seeing the Creator? We need to unpack that.
This is such a deep point. Let's break it down using the idea of capacity. When God reveals himself to an ordinary, incomplete person like this novice, he does so only according to that person's capacity, their measure.
So it's a limited experience.
It's limited, it's filtered, and it's potentially self-deluding. The novice is basically seeing God through a very dirty, very small window.
Right.
But a fully realized saint, like al-Bistami, has spent a lifetime breaking down his ego, polishing that mirror until it's perfect. So he is seen at God's measure.
Ah, I see.
So encountering a perfected human being like that can bring you a deeper, more complete, less veiled truth than your own partial, flawed internal experience ever could. It's about finding the most polished mirror of truth you can.
That makes the shift from asceticism to humility incredibly clear. The goal is to perfect yourself so completely that you become a true vessel for truth, rejecting all the superficial stuff.
And that leads us perfectly to the internal enemies that threaten to just sabotage that entire path. Because even if you achieve al-Bistami's discipline, it can all be destroyed from within.
Malik ibn Dinar said the root of all sin is the love of the world, hub al-dunya.
Right, but there's one specific vice that acts as the ultimate spiritual arsonist.
The destroyer of all good deeds, envy, hasad.
Yes. The Prophet's saying about envy is one of the most sobering warnings in all these sources. Envy eats up good deeds as fire eats up wood.
Just think about that metaphor.
Yeah.
If you spent years gathering wood, doing charity, praying, fasting, and then a single internal fire ignites, the whole stack is gone instantly.
It elevates envy from just a character flaw to a spiritual sabotage mechanism. We tend to think of jealousy as this mild discomfort, but here it's classified as a weapon of mass spiritual destruction.
So what are the consequences? How does it actually work?
Well, let's slow down and look at the 5 major harms of envy they identified. First, as we just said, it corrupts devotion. Your good deeds are just negated. All that hard mujahada becomes pointless.
So it destroys your own efforts first. How does it start to affect other people?
That's the second harm. It creates malice. The envious person is recognizable by 3 things. They backbite when the person they envy is absent, they slander them when they're present, and, this is the most damning, they genuinely rejoice when that person suffers a misfortune.
So it starts in the heart, but it immediately becomes this verbal poison and a kind of gloating over suffering.
And the third harm is maybe the most self-destructive. It leads to useless toil. The source material says the envious person is the most unjust to themselves. They suffer continuous sickness, incurable internal pain, chronic grief. All for nothing. There's no benefit.
That is so applicable today. I mean, think about social media comparison culture. That endless scrolling and feeling inadequate. It's the modern version of useless toil. It's chronic, self-inflicted misery.
It is timeless. Now, the fourth consequence is about clarity. Envy hinders understanding. When your heart is polluted by that, you can't see straight. You can't comprehend deep meanings because your lens is just colored by resentment.
Then the final harm, the end result of this state of mind.
Fifth, it results in deprivation, a lack of victory. Hatim al-Sam said it simply, the envious man is never granted victory. How can you succeed when your entire focus is on someone else's downfall?
What gives this all its ultimate weight is the comparison the sources draw. We're told to seek refuge from this person, but how serious is that command?
Its gravity can't be overstated. God commanded us to seek refuge from the envious person when he envies, and he placed that command right alongside the commands to seek refuge from Satan and from the sorcerer or witch.
So it's in the same category.
In the same category. The tradition views it as a spiritual evil, as potent and destructive as black magic or the devil himself.
To counter that, you need the highest standard of humility, which brings us to the ultimate example, the Prophet Muhammad and the divine guidance he received.
It helps to visualize his daily environment. His physical life was one of extreme simplicity. He didn't have a throne. He'd sit on a small raised platform, a dukkha made of mud, covered by a simple mat woven from palm fiber.
Always facing the Qibla.
Always facing the Qibla, calling it the master of all sittings. And his commitment to good manners, to adab, was so deep that he would often share his own cloak or pillow with a visitor just to honor them, even if it meant his own discomfort.
Yet even he required divine correction. This leads us to the story behind Surat Abasa, the chapter titled, He Frowned. What was going on there?
The Prophet was in the middle of a really important strategic conversation. He was speaking intensely to these powerful disbelievers from the Quraysh tribe in Mecca.
The leaders.
The leaders. His hope was that if he could convert them, it would unlock a mass conversion for the whole city. He was prioritizing what he saw as the greatest strategic good for the community.
And right in the middle of this high-stakes meeting, he gets interrupted.
By the blind man, Ibn Maktum, who was already a believer and was just seeking more knowledge.
So in that moment, the Prophet frowned and turned his attention back to the leaders, feeling like the interruption was just bad timing, and God immediately corrected him in the Quran.
Right. And that correction is often seen as the stern rebuke. But our sources suggest something different, that it was actually a display of affection.
How can a correction be interpreted as tenderness, as tahanun?
Because the act of turning away was a natural human tendency. You engage with the people who hold strategic value over someone who interrupts. God's correction wasn't anger, it was immediate, loving guidance. It redefined the entire value proposition.
What was the new proposition?
That the prophet should prioritize the confirmed, sincere believer Ibn Maktum, who was actively seeking purification over the arrogant deniers, even if they held all the political power.
So sincerity and the desire for purification outweigh any external status or strategic calculation. And the sources tie this purification directly back to the ability to understand truth.
Absolutely. The scholars say that weakness in understanding the deep meanings of the Quran comes from two things. First, a lack of contemplation, that deep, quiet reflection. And second, the pollution of the heart by sins.
So this whole deep dive from al-Bistami's vows to the Prophet's correction, it's all about removing that pollution so the heart can actually see the truth.
Exactly, so it can contemplate effectively and see what's unveiled.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've covered extreme discipline, radical humility, and this terrifying internal threat of envy.
The synthesis is pretty clear. First, true self-mastery requires a commitment that might feel extreme, but it's about breaking the ego's dependence on comfort. Second, real spiritual success demands profound humility, recognizing that even miracles can be a roadblock.
And third, the greatest threat to your progress isn't an external enemy. It's the internal poison of envy, which just nullifies all your good deeds.
But there's always hope. The sources always emphasize the power of sincere repentance. The story of the Gamidia woman who insisted on purifying herself through punishment for a sin that shows the ultimate value of sincerity.
Her repentance was so immense, the Prophet said it could be distributed among 70 people of Medina, and it would be enough for all of them.
That's the depth of cleansing that sincerity can achieve.
So if sincerity is the remedy for sin, and humility is the counter to arrogance, where should we focus our energy to build up that spiritual resilience?
Focus on shukr, on gratitude. Ibn Masud, a great companion, said that gratitude is half of faith. Our sources say that on the day of judgment, the grateful ones will be called out and entered into paradise before anyone else.
Because gratitude shifts your focus.
It instantly shifts your focus from what other people have to what you have already been given. It neutralizes the root of envy right at the source.
So if gratitude really is the key to opening that door, how much more sweetness and inner peace could we find if we focused on expressing genuine thanks for every small favor and every large blessing, instead of constantly looking over the fence?
That is a concept worth mulling over.
Absolutely. A profound thought to carry forward. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.